Buying and selling as we know it has completely transformed in 2021. And I call it the year of 2020, the year of putting the human back in selling. And you can see that even in remote selling situations, we had the ability to engage in really authentic and meaningful ways. And so here's just an example of one of our sales reps, one of our top sales reps at Forrester, who put together a sharing experience on video. We see video actually as one of the top um, formats for which buyers are going to consume content in 2021, up significantly from 2020 and 2019. And so this example, Leah Arnold put together a coffee hour where she brings practitioners, experts, thought leaders together for very quick shares, not more than 10 minutes. And what was really interesting about this is she interviewed me for this session. And after the session, she edited the video, put it up on LinkedIn. And within 24 hours, she had about 20 requests to connect over LinkedIn from non-Forrester types of contacts. So when you're in sales, the ability to acquire those types of contacts is really, really important. And then on the right-hand side of this example, you see she's pitching a CEO of a pet manufacturing company and brought her pet into the discussion to be able to initiate that first contact. So we see the methods and the approaches pretty dramatically changing for salespeople as a result of the fact that many of us are still socially distant. And so we've looked at the implications of the larger global impact of COVID on the white collar workforce. And what we found in the midst of 2020 was that 53% of workers who are currently remote hoped that they would stay working from home, or as Siemens calls it, working from anywhere when the crisis was over. 40% of the companies that we surveyed said they were going to fundamentally change their approach to sales organizational structures and the way they go to market as a result of the impact of COVID. And then from our employee experience research, we find that we're predicting about 300% of pre-COVID levels will exist and work from home when the pandemic is over. So one of the reasons this is so important for today's discussion is that even as you have highly distributed direct and indirect sales forces, you're going to need to onboard new sellers, new partners. You're going to need to develop them, and you're going to need to make sure that they're ready to have that interaction wherever it may be, however it may take place, whether it's on a screen share like we are today, or over digital social channels, or however. The one thing I think that is going to be really crucial to think about is that our research shows that sellers are actually getting less time in front of the customer, in front of the buyer, as that buyer becomes more digitally activated and is able to do more on their own, whether that's going to peer review sites, going to sessions like this, going to do extensive research online, taking a demo on a supplier website. Sellers are only now getting about 16% of their actual time in the selling scenario. So that means that they need to be more ready than ever before to maximize that potential. So some of the environmental changes I just touched on really briefly, information ubiquity, we've been talking about that for some time. The millennial decision maker, we've also been talking about that for several years, and now we have millennials in the global workforce are about 50% of that workforce. And instead of just surfacing up suppliers to evaluate, putting together the short list, we're now seeing millennial decision makers from influencers to coaches to actual economic buyers, and that will continue to change. And this type of buyer is very comfortable in this setting, very comfortable in gathering the efficiencies that a remote and digital world provides. At Forrester, we've also been talking, and I know the market has for some time, around the consumerization of that business buyer, where buyers in the business world now expect and demand interactions that are very similar to what they have in their consumer life, whether that's the ability to search and get recommended content through a Netflix-like experience, or to get product recommendations surface up in a marketplace like Amazon. So we're seeing more and more of that expectation. I was at an event last year with some very, very traditional manufacturing companies, and I asked the CEOs, who are your most important competitive threats? Who do you worry about at night? And most all of them said Amazon, not because they actually compete directly with the company, but because Amazon and other types of consumer content providers are teaching their buyers how to buy and what to expect from that buying experience. And then finally, the COVID-19 pandemic, which is really causing us all to be remote, but in some ways connect more authentically, more with more personalization as a result of insights and data that are derived from many of the rich systems and sales technologies that we can use to facilitate our interactions and engagements. Our research, and my research in particular, has shown that buying behavior has been changing for the last several years, and COVID and the hardships brought forth by the pandemic haven't created new buying scenarios or different buying preferences, so to speak. But what the situation has done is really amplified and created more urgency around some of those trends that are out there. So I've been following these for quite some time. Decisions are taking longer in the B2B world, particularly for those large enterprise sales, where you've got more and more buyers into the mix. We've been observing larger buy-side teams, and those buy-side teams are more and increasingly distributed. So even if you were going on site, oftentimes you'd actually have a large population of the buying committee dialing in or engaging remotely. And with those larger buying groups, you're naturally seeing longer decisions. The increasing distractions of your buyers. So there's so much information coming through many different pipes. And the salesperson now is no longer the only conduit to information into their firm or information about the product or solution that they represent. There's a plethora of other options to acquire information. And so the seller needs to really engage and cut through that noise in a way that's meaningful and personalized. And now with the proliferation of SaaS and as a service delivery models outside of just the pure tech space, you're seeing the risk of increasing churn, where depending on the complexity and size of the book of your business, 1 to 2% churn in the wrong direction on renewal rates can actually be disastrous for companies.